I am talking today with one of my good friends. This is Bill Barrett, and Bill is currently a gentleman farmer in Tennessee. Now that sounds like a great thing to be. And Bill, I have to admit, I'm really jealous, but that hasn't always been your status. I met you when you were a vice president for the world's largest publisher of children's books. And what a great thing. I will candidly admit to anybody that I am completely a book geek. And I suffer from bibliophobia. Do you know what that is?
Not really.
Now, they tell me that bibliophobia is the fear of not having a book to read when you finish reading a book. So I have to have something waiting just in case I finish a book, because if I don't have a book to read, then I don't know what to do with myself when I run out of a book. So if you see behind me here, I have a whole bunch that are just screaming to be read because I got to make sure I have something when I finish. But anyway, we're not here to talk about my reading. We're here to talk about Bill. So Bill, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you're a farmer. When I first met you, I would never have guessed that Bill Barrett would be a gentleman farmer in Tennessee.
Well, I'm not sure, Mike, when I first met you, I would have made that guess either. So that's a lot's happened since we first met. But yes, I'm happily living in the greater Knoxville area. We've got a 65-acre ranch here with Nigerian dwarf goats, some chickens, horses, and if my wife has her way, we'll have a couple of cows soon. So we'll see if that actually happens. So, but yeah, I guess a gentleman farmer and business consultant is what I would technically call myself today, and an avid reader today, which was not always true. So, but that, Mike, it was interesting to me about this, what did you call it?
Bibliophobia.
Bibliophobia. I don't have that because I'm usually reading 2 or 3 books at one time. And once in fact, I almost always have at least 2 books going at one time. And once one's done, another one gets rotated in. So maybe I would have bibliophobia if I didn't have access to books, but I had plenty of access.
So Bill, when you were a child, did you read a lot? What did you like to read?
Yeah, I would say that I was more of a reluctant reader as a child, or one that didn't read a lot. I wasn't a particularly good reader either. I'm slow at it. I didn't like to read orally because I'd have a tendency just to skip words as opposed to when you're reading orally, if you read the whole sentence, etc. But yeah, I as a kid growing up in Michigan, went to a Catholic school, so we had regular access to books through the school library. My dad and mom were pretty normally active readers. We would go to the library occasionally, but I didn't do very well at picking out books that I really liked. But the books that I recall liking as a kid, were the Hardy Boys series and those books. I recall some of that, but yeah, I was more into sports and play, etc. And I didn't really have a very active young reading life. And in fact, that carried through high school. Required reading was what I would read, and rarely was there ever any pleasure reading through high school and really even through college and the first several years out of college. Even after having children, reading to them became something that would happen, but that was different. I didn't do a lot of pleasure reading for myself.
It's interesting, Bill. I didn't know until the other day, and this was kind of a revelation to me. I was talking to a common friend of ours, Alan Boyko, and I did not know why I couldn't play baseball. Now, this is a weird thing, and Alan is a big baseball fan,
Uh-huh.
And he said, I don't know how the topic came up, but we were talking about the mental muscle that it takes to become a reader. And he was using the illustration of baseball. And he said, you know, if you don't start playing baseball when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, you know, you start with T-ball, then coaches pitch, and then eventually, you know, another team member pitches. And I thought, wait a minute, I never played T-ball, never. I never played coach's pitch.
There you go.
And then I understood I played one season of baseball with the other guy pitching on the, you know, from the other team, and it scared the stuff out of him. I couldn't hit a thing, not a
Yeah.
thing. I never played again, and I couldn't understand because I thought I should be able to do this, but I couldn't. And so then I never played again, never.
Right.
And that was such a great illustration to me when I think about, you know, reading being the thing that we work so hard in schools that we, you know, the big push is that by third grade, we want kids to have the mastery of reading. But if they don't get the foundation in kindergarten, first and second grade, we have to still in third grade go back to that and build that foundation.
That's right.
And so to me, that's one of the best things I have ever heard anybody say. And Alan's not a kindergarten teacher. I don't know how I thought that was brilliant. But when you said that right now about, you know, playing sports, I wasn't. I was the guy that was going to the library every weekend and getting stacks. We're not talking about that. I don't know if there was a limit, but I got however many I could, plus from the school library, and I read everything. By the time I was in second grade, I'm reading all these books about, I don't know why I got into this, but I was fascinated with books about World War II. And,
Yeah.
you know, these libraries are all built on the Dewey Decimal System. I don't know who this Dewey guy was, but somebody should not have allowed him to come in contact with libraries.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say, because it's like they hide all the good books based on some number that doesn't make any sense to anybody but librarians. And to any librarian that watches this, I'm sorry, I'll tell you that ahead of time. But it's such a weird system that you can never, for the way a guy thinks, I could never find a book, except if I just pulled covers, you know, and I'm looking, if I found a section, I'd always go to that section again to see if I could find something else. So that was how I did.
Yeah.
You know, in the meantime, you're learning how to play sports, and I'm thinking, I don't know how to play sports. I might as well read.
Well, fortunately, I think I had enough of a foundation that allowed me later in life to find the right pathway back to reading.
So how
And
did
I
you
think it was
do
probably
that?
a combination. Well, I think it's a combination of probably 2 or 3 things that made the biggest difference. Obviously, in having children, reading to them, and I knew the importance of doing that, and so that was part of the seed. And it wasn't so much just reading to them, but reading with them. That became something that
That's huge. Can you
as they
explain,
became
tell me
older.
what you mean about that, reading with them instead of reading to them.
Well, even at 3 and 4 and 5 years old, when they're just really learning, you know, words and letter recognition and things of that nature. And again, you're reading many of the same books over and over. I mean, Goodnight Moon is like, you know,
Oh yeah.
I probably 1,000 times I read that book. But at any rate, because you're doing that repetitively, it was easy to start them, you know, with your finger and having them read with you, and then eventually they, you know, read a sentence and you'd read a sentence, etc. And then as they, you know, got older and you know, went through their own reading path in school, we still continued a fair amount of that at home. So you know, they would read a chapter, I would read a chapter, etc. And so that's definitely a part of the seed that took hold. I think the other most significant thing, Mike, is when 10 years after I graduated from my undergraduate program, I started an MBA. And it was a weekend, it was a Saturday only program. And it was pretty intense. It was, basically for a full year, all but 6 Saturdays in a given year, you were in class from 9 in the morning till 6 at night on Saturdays. And then there was a thesis tied to it. But the piece of that was that you had to do a lot of reading outside of the classroom, right? Because it's it's pretty accelerated program, et cetera. And so that kind of got me in the habit of, I was sort of forced into it to make sure that I could do well in the program.
Right.
And so when that was finished, that reading muscle had been kind of jiggered around and redeveloped. And I'll never forget flying to Sioux Falls, South Dakota for a business trip, and landing there and returning home and realizing, because I had preparatory stuff to do on my way there, but coming back, it was kind of relaxed. I didn't have anything to read. And it was like, I'm reading back then it was TWA, their magazine, right? And it's like, and I vowed to myself, well, I was never going to travel again without a book. And so that was really the door that opened, that became now more of a habit that is a big part of my life now, where as I shared earlier, I'm probably 2 or 3 books at a time I've got going, and I don't necessarily read every day, but pretty close.
So when you were on that plane, what was it that made you think, I'm going to bring a book? Why not? I mean, at that time, there were you could buy little video players.
Yeah.
Why a book?
Well, because I traveled a lot during my MBA, and so I always had my textbooks with me, or case studies, et cetera, that I had to be working on in preparation for the next weekend. And so I was very much in that habit of reading something as opposed to watching a movie or something like that. And so it was that kind of, I don't know, contextual habit that had formed during that coursework that caused me to think, no, I really want something to read as opposed to something to watch.
So when you read today, Bill, what do you read? What grabs your attention?
Yeah, I think I've got I think I probably read in 3 kind of categories. I still love reading young adult books. So YA is, I think it's the best, for me, it's the most enjoyable literature out there for me. I also like so I got YA, and then I got my airport books. Although I don't travel through airports like I used to, I still enjoy, the John Grisham type, I call it, that airport.
And I will tell you, John Grisham has seen a resurgence.
Yeah.
His newer books, I think, are almost just as good as his first books.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I just finished Sully, his, I think it's his latest book, which I think was brilliant. I just
about baseball, right?
No, this one's about basketball.
Basketball, okay.
Calico Joe is the one that he wrote about baseball. But anyway, so then the third category would be kind of a combination of business educational books. I still for instance, right now, Simon Sinek's what's it called? Leaders Eat Last, or I think that's what it's called. I just started that again. I started it a while back and got caught into another book, so it came back up. So Leaders Eat Last, I just started that last night, and so it's probably those 3 categories. Although I do like historical fiction, I do like biographies, autobiographies. So and then occasionally humor. But I'm a big person that takes recommendations from folks. People that I know that know me will typically, like Alan. You mentioned Alan Boyko. He recommended a book not too terribly long ago to me called Pappy Land. And it was really the story of the Pappy Van Winkle family and the whiskey family. It was a really wonderful story. It's written by a Sports Illustrated author. And
what is the name of that book again?
It's called Pappy Land. I will tell you this, and I don't necessarily like reading on devices, although that's one that I did read on a device because I still love the book in my hand kind of reader. And because I wanted to get it right away, I of course did it with my Kindle. And but it was very well written, and it's a good story all the way around.
Interesting. Now, you said you read a lot of YA books. Tell me what you've read recently that's good.
So, gosh, I haven't read a whole lot of YA recently, but you know, Jason Reynolds, you know, those books have been terrific. I'm kind of drawing a blank here right now, but because I just read 2 Grisham books. I read a book by a former principal. In fact, you and I were talking beforehand about Don Vu's book on his reading life, and those are the ones that are most fresh in my mind right now.
I'm always looking for new books. I constantly, here's what I do, because I was spending so much in buying books that I don't read books twice. You know, it's very rare for me to read the same book twice. And what I found is that most people don't read the same books that I read. So I would end up either giving them away or giving, you know, if we ever had a yard sale, I'd put them in a yard sale, and you know, books that I paid $25 for, and I'd sell them for 25 cents. And I thought that's not a very smart business decision. So I started, and this was hard for me, I started reading on my iPad. And so I now get almost all of my books on my iPad checked out from the public library, which means sometimes it's 5 or 6 weeks, sometimes a couple months until I can get the book that I want to read. Whereas before, the day it came in, you know, into the stores, I'm there and I'm buying the book. Well, the interesting thing is that now I have books that are, you know, ones that I still pick up the paper copy of the book, and it takes me longer to pick that up and read it because I'm always reading on the iPad constantly. And so you know, I like the smell of a book. I like the way a book feels in my hand. And so it was a huge transition to me to switch over to using an iPad to read on. So that's kind of a different thing, but
it's interesting though too. You know, in one's reading life, I mentioned earlier that I wasn't a very fast reader, and I didn't read out loud very well. And so one of the other realizations that I had through my experiences at Scholastic, again, I traveled quite a bit. I would buy audiobooks to listen to sometimes. And then I found out that depending on the deal, you could get a Kindle version of the audiobook free or at a very low price, $2 or something like that. And so I thought, well, why not? Why not be able to, you know, listen to some parts, read some parts? Well, then I discovered that in order to build my reading stamina and my speed, the more you hear some, you know, words that may not be familiar to you, and you see sentence structure being spoken to you, it sort of helps your mind become frankly just a better reader. So I developed the habit and went through a period of probably 2 or 3 years where I would buy a book on audio, but I'd also buy the paper or the you know, Kindle version of it.
Sure.
And I would read along with the author.
Oh, that's really smart, Bill.
Well, and then you know, with audiobooks, you can turn up the dial.
Right.
So, you know, you can turn it up to 1.5 or 1 1/4, you know, 1 3/4, 2, etc. So you really started to train your eye to read quicker. And that for me was very helpful because it's allowed me to be a better reader now and a faster reader so that I can, you know, I enjoy it more.
Now, you know, it's funny. I'm an educator. I've been a teacher all my life, and I never once would have thought about that. And that's a really cool idea. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I got that I think it was at one of the seminars that we put on where they were talking about the importance of reading out loud. And the idea is that it helps students become, or people in general, become more familiar with the cadence of the design of the cadence and how it was meant to be heard and, read. And, because in a book, obviously you got commas, you have punctuation, et cetera, and you know that there's natural places to pause, but that doesn't always happen with punctuation.
Wow.
So anyway, it hit me. I was like, well, that's interesting. I could buy this book for $1 and have a printed version or a Kindle version, and I can listen to it. Well, let's see what this is like. So
That's pretty impressive. Maybe you need to write a book.
I don't know about that.
I'm kind of thinking about that, Bill. That's kind of interesting. Things I learned that I didn't know I was learning or something like that. I don't know. It's got a real ring to it.
That's an interesting idea. I don't know. I've got goats and chickens to take care of, so I'm not sure that I have a whole lot of time for that.
Bill, as always, it is great talking to you. And you're one of those guys that every time I talk to you, I learn something.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
I'm just amazed. Every one of you guys that used to work together when I had the privilege of interacting with that wonderful Scholastic team. I mean, with Alan and Ann and you, and what a great days we had, what great fun we had, and what wonderful things you guys did for teachers and principals and kids. And those were great days. And I have to tell you, for me, who I have always had this passion for reading and for literacy, it lit a fire in me. And so today, people know that about me. Hey, that's the guy that likes to talk about getting boys to read, and there's nothing better. I've written about a lot of stuff. I write a lot of stuff about politics, and especially education politics. And I do that because somebody has to do that. I can't be quiet about some of the things that I hear and some of the things that are going on in my own state. But the things that I love to talk about are the exciting things to me when I see a kid reading because they choose to read, or I hear a boy talking about a book that they just found and they're excited about that. To me, that's the best.
Yeah.
When I hear a guy like you, a very accomplished businessman, and now becoming a very accomplished rancher, that's pretty. That makes me a little nervous. I don't think I ever want. That's not in my list of things that I want to do. But I always like learning from everybody I talk to. And today I've learned another thing about how to read faster. And I'm thinking I really like that idea. So
it works. It definitely works.
Very cool. So
yeah.
And Bill, we'll stay in touch. And
great.
Been very great talking to you again today. And if you're not on Facebook, if you get on Facebook, look up our webpage. It is When Boys Read, Great Things Happen. So you will be on there. You will be this week's feature story.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Mike. It's great seeing you, and thanks for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you. We'll see you, Bill.